My name is Matthew Story. I'm a collections curator at Historic Royal Palaces, and it's my pleasure to serve on the steering group of the Queer Heritage and Collections Network. And I think we can all agree we had an absolutely wonderful day yesterday. My brain was full of ideas, was really inspired by the passion of everybody in this room. And I think we all have got ideas of how we can take this work further. I'm particularly pleased to chair the session this morning because all of our papers this morning look in different ways at how we can work with different communities, and that, I think, is something that motivates all of us. Because of the trains, and to give our speakers who have arrived a little bit later a bit of time just to get their breath and get a cup of tea, we are changing the order of the papers this morning. So first up, we'll have Roebuck and Ashlynn Hudson-Welburn of the National Railway Museum. Second, we'll have Laura Chesover and Chloe Dennis of the British Library. And third, we'll have Tash Walker and Sue Shave from Nell and Sue Shave Consulting. So just a bit of a change of the order there. We don't have any online participation today, so it's just us in the room. Because of the late start, we will eat into our extended break and networking, though it looks like you've all done a fabulous job of networking already this morning. We'll aim for an hour for this session and just cut the extended break and networking by half an hour. But that still gives you plenty of time to get a cup of tea and chat to anybody, especially our amazing speakers from the session today. So that's enough from me. I'm going to start by introducing Roebuck and Ashlynn Hudson-Welburn of the National Railway Museum, which was my dad's favourite museum. So it's a real pleasure to have you here. And their title is People, Pride and Progress, Preserving the Voices of Rail's LGBTQ+ History. Can I round of applause, please?
Morning, everyone. I mean, it's everyone's favourite museum, right?
That's a dangerous room to say that. And a dangerous building, possibly. My name's Roebuck. I work in the exhibitions team at the Railway Museum. And
I am Ashlynn Hudson-Welburn. I am a curator at the National Railway Museum, curator of archives. Right, so, God, I've got the remote. I forgot that. Right, so, yeah, there we go. That was the side we were supposed to say that on. Okay, so we're going to talk to you a bit about our project, People, Pride and Progress, which is a project we're doing at the museum to collect oral history stories from members of the railway community who are from the LGBTQIA+ community. This is something which we're very, very keen to do, and we have been now for some time, since 2018, when we started trying to research LGBTQIA+ histories in our collection. It was one of those sad things that I think a lot of archives, any of you who've done research in archives will know this. If you're looking for queer stories, you know you're not going to find very much, and it's always really sad, but you look anyway, and quite often what you do turn up is pretty much nothing. So it is one of those things where we started researching it, and we did find, as we expected, that there was quite a gap. We had things like, police records, and we didn't have many personal records for this community. It's one of the only communities where most of what we have is outside records looking in. We do not have the personal journey from the inside, how people felt in the industry, how people feel now, and how the experience of being queer in rail actually impacts on a person's life and experience. So as we were sort of recognizing that gap, we decided, with most of the community's history really now only existing still in, the memories of the people that lived it, especially if you're looking, if you want to research historically, we have what we have in the archives, but in people's memories, we can still reach back at the moment through most of the British Rail era, so right the way to 1950s and 60s. There are people still alive who remember it. So we decided it was an urgent priority to go out and speak to those people because we wanted those stories to be something that we could preserve and that we could, share and celebrate, and that we'd have then for future generations of our community and, to be able to share our community stories more widely with the world. Because once you have that kind of material, then you can start to include it in your wider exhibits and the things you're doing. But if you don't have anything to work with, then it's really hard. And if you don't have it coming from the community themselves and you don't have that voice, it's really good to let people speak for themselves, we find, with communities. So that was what we wanted to achieve with this project. So what we set off to do, we wanted to record 70 one-on-one intergenerational oral history interviews. And so what we were looking for with that was 30 volunteers who work in rail now, or have worked in rail very recently and are, have a strong personal connection with the LGBTQIA+ community, or, themselves are members of the community. And we wanted to record 70 interviews with participants, prioritizing originally older members of the community, as, their stories are the most at risk, because once people pass away, that's it. Their stories and all those experiences they could tell us about are gone. So we started off prioritizing them, and as the project has gone on, we've slowly started incorporating people who started more and more recently, which also gives us a really good spread of people in similar roles at similar points in their careers, historically and in the present, where we can see how things are similar and differ. As well. So that was what we set off to try and achieve. But in addition to that, we also set off to do 5 sort of group sessions where popular themes, things that are coming up consistently with a lot of the interviews and the stories, bringing together groups of people from the community to speak about those and to all share their memories and experiences and try and dive deeper into any sort of core themes, locations, things that come up. And also to spend some time, workplace studies we're calling it, spending some time with some of our volunteers in their day jobs today as well, to go out and, record with them as they do their job for a couple of days, or try and get what their experience actually is today as an LGBTQIA+ person working in rail with a slightly more dynamic archive. So that is what we set off to do, and I will let you take over.
Thank you very much. So it is an ongoing project, so we are still going, we're still recording and finding participants, and we have had some themes start to emerge. This is by no means an exhaustive list, and I'm also not going to read the full list on the screen, but what we've definitely seen emerging are themes of people living double lives, people dealing with challenges throughout their roles and throughout their careers with hostility, direct hostility and indirect hostility, lots of queerphobia, including internalized queerphobia. We've also seen lots of our participants talking about the impact of HIV on their lives and their communities and their careers. We've also seen lots of really positive stories emerging, particularly about the importance of finding a role model in the rail industry and coming together in queer networks, and the importance of unions, particularly in the rail industry, and also the allyship as well that these people found throughout their careers. So we've had some really, really interesting themes start to come out, and as we are getting ready to put these things on display in our museum, we will be kind of dialing down into some of the themes and the takeaways, but we have one key takeaway for you today, which is if you are a lesbian in the 80s and 90s and you want to find a partner, go on a sports holiday. That's something that we've heard a lot. So yeah. So one of the things that we thinking about doing for quite a long time at the National Railway Museum was a queer railway history trail. And really it's a case of what came first, the project or the trail. They were more or less being thought about at the same time. So as Ashlynn said, thoughts about the project and how that might look started in 2018. It took quite a long time to get permission to apply for funding because there were quite a lot of other very large-scale projects happening at the National Railway Museum over the last few years. And in about 2022, we started being involved in York Pride and trying to improve our inclusivity both inside the museum and outside the museum within our staff networks and also with visitors as well. And around about the same time, we had permission to apply for funding for the project. So these two things kind of came along around about the same time, the trail, the idea for a trail, and an exhibition, and the People, Pride and Progress project, which was a really good thing because if we tried to make a trail just out of general queer railway history, as Ashlynn said, it's all quite general. We don't get a sense of what it was really like for people to live in these roles, to have these careers, what it felt like to be them, what the impact was of their life and their identity on their role, and vice versa. So it was really, really important to us that if we were developing a display, we would do it with actual recordings and experiences of participants. So what we developed this year, quite quickly, quite a quick turnaround, was meant to be kind of a snapshot of the project in progress. So we put that in our North Shed space, which is an open store. We wanted to immediately bring more awareness of the project because we are still trying to talk to participants. And we also wanted to immediately start celebrating the community and their impact on rail industry because some of the things we found we felt really, really profound and we wanted to share them as quickly as possible. So we installed this trail in time for Pride this year. And it is still there until the middle of December. So if you're planning a trip to York in the next couple of weeks...
you put them on your tables if you want to see them.
There we go. So we wanted to centre the voices of the participants. We wanted to focus on them and not objects in our museum. So with our trail, we actually used objects in our North Shed. So we matched 10 objects to 10 participants. Oh, there we go. But the objects were just there as a catalyst for learning about the person. So this was very much participant first, object second, which is why we didn't put images of the objects on our trail. The North Shed space is quite a complicated space to try and interpret. Most things in there have been kind of temporary and experimental so far, and this was no different. But we wanted to disrupt the space with very eye-catching content and things that visitors wouldn't necessarily expect to see. So we had these panels with segments from the participants' recordings, which were pointing towards the object that we'd chosen to represent their career. And we also had QR codes so that people could listen to the recordings. And as part of our National Lottery Heritage Fund funding that we had, we were also able to evaluate this trail specifically with LGBTQIA audiences, which was something really fantastic that our audience insight team were able to do. So they reached through the York LGBT Forum, and they recruited participants from across the spectrum of identities. They spoke to people from 16 to 60. They spoke to individuals, couples, and community groups together, which was really fantastic. It's the first time that we have done audience research where we specifically just talked to this community about a trail that was made by them and for them as well. And they really valued hearing the experiences of participants in their own words. They found a lot of what they heard very profound, very moving. They were able, especially older participants, to really resonate those experiences with their own experiences as well. And what we found is that partially because we've called it People, Pride and Progress, they really wanted to hear about the pride and the progress. So they wanted to hear those positive stories. They wanted to hear more about the resilience, more about the allies, and the progress that people made in these careers and how they impacted the rail industry to create a kind of very prideful feel, essentially. That's what they wanted. So that's what we're taking away from that. I think Ashlyn's going to talk about lessons learned.
Which slide are we on? That one?
Yep.
Yeah, so with the trail, so one of the things we really wanted to do by doing this, it was largely to gather this audience insight. We did find, because we'd never in the museum tried to interpret these kind of personal stories before with a community speaking for themselves, we were very keen that this whole thing was more of a test of what works, how does the community respond to different ways that we're doing it. And we did find that a lot of the feedback did align with what we were thinking we would get. And yes, like one of the things, obviously, people really love to hear the community telling its own stories. That came out a lot in the feedback. And we also found that we had nailed, some of the other things really well. Like the timing, people really thought 30 to 40 minutes was the perfect length for a trail. So we found that was something that was really good. But we did find we were getting a fair bit of consistent sort of criticism of this gallery's at the side of the museum. People felt that this trail was a bit tucked away, and there was a lot of desire that it should have been in the sort of main gallery, which would have been a lot harder for us to do because there's not really places to put things out for it in the same way, and things move a lot in there, so we wouldn't have had it for very long. But that was something that consistently came up, was that people want, when you do this work, that it should be front and center of what they're seeing. And we were told things like, we'd just been reopening one of our galleries that has just gone a big overhaul, and there was a strong desire that, well, why aren't you celebrating this on the same scale as that, making a big, announcements on social media, in the press, and all this stuff about it. So there was a strong desire that if we're going to do this, we should be doing it on the same scale that we would even a big grand opening. So that was something that we thought, actually, that's probably a fair thing that we should do. There was also criticism that, people felt it felt too temporary, which, it was. It was admittedly done on a temporary basis to sort of test the experience, but people didn't like how the boards were attached with, what do you call them, the little plastic...
Cable ties.
Cable ties.
Yeah.
So we did find that there was a lot of desire that people wanted it to look more permanent, have more of a sense of presence in the gallery. And there was also, actually that is the main one, people wanted it to be permanent in the gallery, not just temporary. So that was something that we found interesting from what people were telling us as well. And one of the other main things was that people found the stories, even though many of them linked very strongly to the objects, a lot of people were saying that they weren't sure what they should be focusing on, the object or the oral history. And if the focus should be the oral history, there were actually quite a few people who were suggesting that we do not connect the oral history to an object at all, and maybe we just put oral histories around and give people a map to different points to listen to an oral history as a way of engaging. So that is something we're going to be thinking about as we go forward and do more things like this. Whether we still connect it to an object, how strong that connection has to be, because we thought that an object, even if the connection was a bit tenuous, like somebody worked on the underground in an operational side, so we have a model of the kind of place they worked in, that is a bit, there's a connection there, but it doesn't directly link to the queer story that they're telling. So that was something that we're taking away from that as well. And there was also a strong desire that, we should focus the marketing of this kind of thing specifically through the community as well. So we learned quite a few things that were very interesting to us through doing that. Next slide, please. But I'll come back quickly just to close. Some of the lessons we've learned on this project more generally. So one of the things that was most unique about this project, I think, is that the team of volunteers carrying out the interviews are themselves members of the community and members of the rail industry. So they come with a very unique angle that a general team of volunteers wouldn't be able to. And it kind of shows in some of the interviews, not all of them, but some of them, with that unique perspective of working in a similar role with a similar identity, has meant we've had some interesting questions asked that we wouldn't necessarily have got if it were just me going out as a museum professional or another team of volunteers who didn't have that direct connection. So there have been some really strong benefits, and we've really enjoyed that we've had the chance to give these people in the industry and the community that chance to connect with other members of the community, older members of the community, and develop skills in oral history. And we found that was something that was really appreciated. But this did come with a lot of challenges. A team of full-time workers in rail do not have a lot of time to do this. We have found that it's quite challenging. The people who are most keen to volunteer for stuff like this are the people who are most keen to volunteer for lots of things. Many of them are running staff networks and all sorts. So you end up competing for their very precious time. And what that has meant is the project has gone much more slowly than if, say, I were going out to do those interviews, or I'd recruited a team of volunteers that, the usual demographics, students and retired people who would have had more time to do it. So that has meant that for those benefits, we have had a trade-off in how long it takes to achieve it. But it has also had a big benefit of finding participants with this project. Because we don't know who the interviewees were up front, it's Usually with an oral history project, you know where the people are you want to interview and you know who they are. Like a factory closed in town, so you're going to go and interview the people there. But we don't know who these people are. We don't know where they are. We didn't know how to reach them. So we've been trying an awful lot of things, and what we found was the most useful was person-to-person approaches, going out and meeting the community at events and things. And by having participants who are in that community in those spaces, they have done so much of the legwork of networking and finding those older members of the community to speak to, who've worked in their industries before, because they know people who are older than them in the industry, who then also know people. And we found that was a really strong benefit as well. But I will leave that there, because we want to cut to playing you one of the clips to give you a taste of the oral histories that have come out of this. So just a 3-minute clip to end on for you.
Leading up to that, how were you hiding? How were you hiding the fact that, or did you?
Oh gosh, it was awful. It was terrible because it used to be called like Pink Brigade at Charing Cross. Secret drivers, platform staff who used to meet at the Halfway to Heaven. So we see each other in Halfway to Heaven, which is a gay bar, and Clone Zone, which is, I think it's called Clone Zone, right at the bottom. And we see each other on the trains and platforms, just a nod, the winks. It's all very secretive. But every time one was outed, guess what? It's such big news, and they got absolutely vilified for it. The comments, the nastiness, it's quite horrific. When I came out to work, my colleague said to me in the stations, we don't care, you're Simon, you're all right. Some of them, not everybody.
I'm really interested in this secret society. So there was quite a few of you who knew each other.
Yes.
Okay.
We was the original what you've got now, the LGBTQ, but secret. Wow. And we called it the Pink Brigade.
The Pink Brigade.
Those was brought up in the 80s and 90s, remember also about the third carriage of a train. So all gays sat in the third carriage of a train, going home because they felt safer. But also the other side was quite a hook up as well. So you get a train from Charing Cross, you all sat in the third carriage.
Third carriage. Why the third carriage, and how did you know about this?
Word of mouth.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what? So you sit on the third carriage because you knew it was likely someone else in that carriage was
Would be
also
gay, yeah.
Amazing.
I feel safer in numbers.
Wow. Okay.
Whereas the train's out of Charing Cross, the third carriage, so yeah, it's quite, yep.
I mean, that is a piece of history in itself. You know, does anybody else ever? I don't know about that.
You're too young.
You're too young. Thanks, babe.
Yeah, you're too young. Yeah, but ask the older generation about the third carriage.
Yeah.
I would know about it.
Yeah. Okay, and then there was also Halfway to Heaven. I mean, this must have been happening around the country because there's other history, you know, in different industries and different places where there's lots of secret stuff as well. A previous interview that I had today with Daniel Richards was talking about a secret club that was in Cornwall.
Yeah.
It was literally someone's living room. So there's all this stuff coming
Had that
out.
in Blackpool as well.
Really?
This house with a teapot. Put a teapot with a coat in the window. We made us handbag friendly. And that was the secret in Blackpool up north. The teapot.
I love it. Was there any kind of secret society in Brixton where you grew up? Hackney, sorry, where you grew up.
Brixton.
Brixton, sorry.
Yeah, but say too much about what happened, so no. But there was.
There was.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I know which carriage I'll be getting on at Charing Cross next time I'm there. Thank you so much for that wonderful talk. And just to say, there'll be a chance for questions and answers for all of our speakers this morning at the end of the panel. So it's my great pleasure to welcome our next speakers, Laura Chesover and Chloe Dennis from the British Library, talking about finding your audience. How do we connect school audiences to the queer stories in the collection of the British Library? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Should we introduce ourselves?
Yeah.
Okay, so my name is Chloe Dennis, my pronouns are she, her, and I am a learning facilitator at the British Library, so that means that my job is generally developing and delivering workshops for our school audiences, so you all are a little bit older than my usual crowd.
My name is Laura Chesover. I'm the lead producer for schools at the British Library. I oversee the team that we work with, and I'll just talk you through a little bit of what our programme looks like before we get started on the case study that we're going to unpack today. So the schools programme at the British Library is a busy and vibrant one. We welcome about 22,000 students and teachers on site and through hybrid live streamed events every year. The team is a really brilliant creative team that includes Chloe and 5 other learning facilitators, a national outreach manager and a learning coordinator. So that just gives you a context to frame our work in.
Right, so when we look at doing queer work at the British Library, the question of what's queer at the British Library might be one you ask. We have 200 million items, so the answer is quite a lot. I think we're quite lucky in that we don't have to look too far into our collection to find things. So we have manuscripts, magazines, sketches, photographs. You can see a satirical sketch of the Chevalier d'Eon, who I know got a little mention yesterday as well, some placards from Outrage, zines, a sketch of the Ladies of Llangollen, a queer Arab language tree, Oscar Wilde, Sappho magazine, 17th century Japanese prints. It goes on and on and on. So whilst we have a lot, I joined the library in October 2023, but that was not the most momentous thing that happened at the British Library in October 2023. As some of you may know, we had quite a bad cyber attack, which we're still feeling the repercussions of now. So joining and trying to find this stuff was quite difficult. We couldn't search the catalogues as we normally would. So I basically became reliant on networking within the library. We have over 100 curators, many of which part of the LGBTQ+ community themselves, who are more than happy to help me find the items that they knew were in there and to sort of bring them to our attention. We were quite lucky also at the time that someone was already in the process of curating a little display about queer lives in literature in the gallery. So we knew that we had all this stuff, and we wanted to try and find a way to bring it to a school's audience. But Laura's just going to talk a little bit about the context of our audience and what's going on in relation to schools' audiences and a little bit specifically school libraries at this current time.
Yeah, so we work with teachers as gatekeepers to bring students to the library. So their context is really important to us, because if we can't make them feel safe and that they trust us as a place to be, they won't be with us at all. And so, first of all, one of our most important groups are our school librarians. They bring lots of trips to us, and we have a particularly special relationship as the National Library with them. So it's particularly pertinent that we know from anecdotal evidence from our school librarian colleagues and from stakeholders that we work with, such as the Schools Libraries Association, that the number of requests coming in from parents and interest groups to remove books from school libraries that showcase, depict, advocate for the LGBTQ+ community and represent the realities of people's lives is increasing. We see that in the media as well. So we're very aware that our school librarians are working within this context as we approach this work. We're also really aware that school libraries are really precious spaces. They're places of sanctuary for young people with marginalised identities. And we just wanted to dwell on that for a moment and celebrate how important the work of school librarians is, because it really informs why we felt this work was so important. This is a case study of a group of young people, a trans network within a school protesting against cuts to school libraries in their city. And the quotes are just powerful and moving, I think. My school library was the only place I could go to feel safe as a queer, autistic young person. I loved my school library. My librarian has helped me find my identity. She has saved my life. So we're aware of what's happening in school libraries, but then more generally, we're also aware of what's happening in schools. And don't worry, we're not going to read this slide, but if that feels like overwhelm, this is what teachers are dealing with. Both draft guidance from 2023 around gender questioning children, which hasn't been enacted, and also statutory guidance around the RHSC curriculum, which we know is having a chilling effect on how empowered teachers feel to be able to represent the realities of all the children in their classrooms and in their school libraries. But here's the interesting part. the guidance doesn't apply to us. And so as a cultural organisation, we sit in a really interesting space where we can be a place of sanctuary for our school librarians, our teachers, and our school students.
So in terms of trying to find out what we could do with this audience, we felt it was really important to consult with teachers to find out what they could get sign-off on, what they could, realistically book and bring their kids to. So we ran some consultations. One was in person. We brought a few teachers to our learning centre, and some of our amazing curatorial colleagues got out some of those items that we saw. We asked them to think about where they saw curriculum links, any highlighted items, any items they felt might be a bit difficult, make them a bit anxious. We did the same thing online, so I sort of put everything into a Padlet. We managed to consult with history, biology, sociology, modern forage language teachers, but strangely no English teachers. So our results and sort of reflections from that consultation were maybe not quite what we expected. English teachers, we didn't manage to engage any of them, despite some seemingly obvious curriculum links. So Oscar Wilde, Virginia Woolf, Carol Ann Duffy, who's the other person I've written down, Sarah Waters, many, many more. These are all people that are on the curriculum, but we didn't manage to get any English teachers in to consult with us. There was a bit more of a positive reaction from history teachers, but the links they were bringing up were generally more negative parts of history, so crime and punishment modules, focusing on men being arrested, medicine and the AIDS crisis, not things that necessarily are exactly the kind of thing that I had in mind. We sort of floated the idea of PHSE. We were told that would be hard to get signed off as a trip, and overall the curriculum links weren't super strong. But there were some sort of more positive things. So there was this idea that maybe there'd be a stronger angle for sociology at A level. The teachers were really interested in intersectionality and something that would help to build empathy. What they really wanted was ready-to-go resources that they could just use in the classroom. And they sort of pointed out that LGBTQ plus stories in school are sort of meant to be integrated into wider education. So getting something signed off outside of those LGBTQ plus history months or Pride months might be a little bit difficult for those reasons. So we were sort of left asking, where do we go from here?
Absolutely. And as a student of a socially engaged practice master's, I had this idea in mind that that lovely consultation that Chloe put together would organically grow into this gorgeous co-creational practice, centering the agency of our teachers who would lead the way for us. None of that really happened. None of it really came together in themes that we felt we could work with to reach a significant audience, and we felt that was important. So this continues to be a work in progress, and it's iterative, and it was really interesting to hear the presentation before reflect on a similar theme. We've had to get comfortable with the idea it might not be going in the direction that we thought it was going in. Chloe alluded to our English teachers. When we say we reached out, we worked with the National Association of Teachers of English, NATE, and their LGBTQ plus subgroup, and still no English teachers were able to engage with us. So I think we have to be prepared to be resourceful and creative in the way that we approach the outreach and the stakeholder networking part. Giving ourselves the freedom to explore, though, was really important. The other thing that was really important was actually a takeaway that came from the trans-inclusive training that we both took part in at the British Library. It was run by the RCMG and Richard Sandell and colleagues. One of the messages around that was the need for buy-in at every level of the organisation in order for the work to feel supported and for us as a team to feel safe to do that work. So what that looked like as we have gone through this process is making time and space for Chloe to be able to present what she's just presented here to colleagues within our own learning and participation team, and then wider departmentally at our public engagement team. So our Director of Public Engagement is fully supportive and cited on this work. And throughout that time, also, me as the line manager, the team leader, being in constant dialogue with our Director of Communications around this. And I'm really pleased to say that we have enjoyed nothing but wholehearted support for this project from the library, but it does feel really important in engaging in this work with an audience of young people. So we were still thinking, where do we go from here, when events do what they always do, which is overtake you. We're going off on a tangent and coming back around, so bear with me a little bit. we had the opportunity to bring in a writer called Jason Reynolds, who is a huge YA American author, and he'd just written a book about teenagers in a relationship losing their virginity. And we wanted to bring him into the library, but we also needed to know how we could do this so that school librarians and teachers would feel that this was age appropriate and not going to be something that would be difficult for them to do. It doesn't have a queer theme, but it felt like sensitive content that we just wanted to check in with our amazing network of school librarians about. So we did that, and they came back with a resounding, yes, we love Jason Reynolds, we know what he's about, we get it, it's all good, book him and we'll be there. And so we did, and it was brilliant, one of the best things we've done. But, coming back round from that tangent, one of the school librarians that we work with came back with this. I'm going to read it in full, which I know is a no-no, but sorry. She said, I just thought I'd send you a wondering email after the prompt about Jason Reynolds. In future, I think an author event which is linked to LGBT History Month or Schools Diversity Week in June would be really popular. Most schools have a Rainbow Club or equivalent, but not always the cash to spend on getting an LGBTQ author in. And there are still, sadly, in 2025, lots of schools-based issues about this as well. So it would be much easier for a lot of schools to bring a small group to a bigger external event. Anyway, just a thought for the future. Well, this was just really, really exciting on so many levels. First of all, that someone had trusted us with this information, because there's a lot going on here in those brackets that's not being said, which speak to all the pressures that we've looked at the beginning of the presentation. So huge pride in my team for creating that space for somebody to come forward like that. And then real excitement that here is an opportunity to connect with an audience and be there for our audience, which feels extremely important as the National Library. So, we went with it. We did exactly what she suggested.
Yeah, so we had a little chat with this librarian and we talked about what authors might be interesting. Sort of serendipitously, Laura had been in touch with a publicist for an author and graphic novelist really called Harry Connor, who I also weirdly know from being gay and drawing back in the day. And Harry had recently published their first historical fiction graphic novel based on Jane Austen novels and real queer figures from history. And Harry's work made me think of another author called Lex Croucher, who I used to watch on YouTube when I was a teenager, but who is now quite a successful YA and also for adults novelist who'd also written queer fiction set in the Regency period, although their YA novels are more medieval historical fantasy. So we contacted them and asked if they would be interested in doing an event for school children, and they were both really up for it. We did want to make sure, though, that we are still centering our collection and connecting there. So as part of the day, we arranged, we always say the word show and tell in the library. I don't know if that's a term used outside. We get the collections items out and people can come and look at them. So I worked with, again, some more amazing curators to find some collection items that would link to Lex and Harry's work, specifically the Regency period. So we had some dance manuals with diagrams and music on how to dance in the Regency ballroom, but we also wanted to highlight some of those real queer historical figures. So the Chevalier d'Eon makes a comeback. We got out this drawing and some papers and newspaper articles relating to her. We also got out a sketch of the ladies of Llangollen and a letter signed by both of them. They are two women who lived together in a cottage in Wales in the Regency period. They were quite a source of fascination for a lot of people. They were visited by Wordsworth and Byron and exchanged letters with Queen Charlotte. So they also just seemed to live a lovely life and be really into decorating. And the other really exciting item that we got out, which, and I'm not about to imply that she was queer, although I think maybe some people would try to argue that she was, we have an amazing collection. So we were able to get out the manuscript for Jane Austen's Persuasion. It's a very special item because I believe it's the only surviving thing written in her hand that she intended for publication. So in the morning, students were able to come up behind the scenes at the British Library to one of our rooms and see these items for about 20 minutes, talk to our curators. I think some of them tried to reenact the dances in the diagrams there. And it was a really special moment. We don't often get to put real collection items in front of our audience, which is one of our frustrations of the program because we need to have curators present and they can't always be there with us. And then after this, in the afternoon, we had our talk with Lex and Harry. There's me stepping for the first time into the role of moderator. And students had pre-submitted questions in the morning, so they asked Lex and Harry about their motivations, about their literary inspirations, their journeys to becoming authors. And one of the pre-submitted questions was also, do you slay all day? These were questions that they were allowed to submit anonymously, and I almost didn't ask it, but the children loved that got asked. And so I just want to reflect on some of the feedback that we got from that event. So the positives first. As some of you may know, collecting feedback can be extremely difficult if you don't do it there and then. So the first way we collected feedback was we gave them some bits of poster paper to write their thoughts on at the back. We asked them, what did we enjoy the most? And these are the comments we got, which on the first glance might seem pretty silly. So we've got a lot. If you can't read it, it just says gay, gay. It was gay. Gay slay books. They enjoyed the queer vibes. It was a chance to meet gay people. It was really sick to see people like me. All the staff and atmosphere was so nice and supportive, and everyone was nice and welcoming. So I think what I want to take away from that is that they felt safe enough to write those silly comments, and they felt like they enjoyed being around other people. And I don't know if I said it, but most of the groups there were school pride or rainbow clubs that had been invited by the librarians we reached out to. I was also then really lucky, and this never happens, to get a follow-up chat with some of the students afterwards, and they really stressed that they enjoyed being around queer people from other schools that weren't already their friends. They liked learning that trans people weren't new. One student had taken a picture of the ladies of Llangollen, and the other had gone away to research more about them, and they said the library felt nice and welcoming. If students are difficult to get feedback from, then teachers are impossible. I asked for some feedback via emails, and luckily one teacher did come back with some really lovely feedback. I won't read it all out, but again, they summarized a chance to be with community, a safe environment. They said it's been the best trip of the year, and they said they love seeing the students dance, and it made them understand that there have always been queer people, they just haven't been widely publicized. Obviously, all of this is lovely. This is a little rainbow that one of them drew on the feedback. But obviously, the positives are lovely, but they're not always what we're most interested in. So what we can do better is a little hard to get out of them. But they kind of wanted to have their questions accepted more in real time, to be able to put their hands up, have more of a conversation. They wanted to be able to socialize with students from other schools. And the teachers also wanted it to be a bit more discussion-based. They found it a bit hard to sit still for all the time. Make it a little bit more interactive. So with all that wonderful feedback, we were like, where can we go with this? What can we do? What's next? And an opportunity presented itself.
Yeah, again, events overtook us. So I guess talking to this audience, you might already be aware of this news story that the British Library reinstated Oscar Wilde's Reader's Pass this year. After 130 years, it was revoked upon his conviction by our precursor organisation, the British Museum. Our cultural events team have been working on this for ages, and all credit to them. They had created a really gorgeous, symbolic event, bringing together Merlin Holland and the chair of our board, Dame Carol Black, to hand over the pass upon the publication of Merlin Holland's publication of the biography of Oscar Wilde. When we heard about it, we got quite excited, and here's an insight into our WhatsApp chat. We knew that we could do something with this for schools, because we knew that all the great Oscar Wilde treasures of our archive were coming out on display for a VIP show and tell. So we knew there was an opportunity to piggyback off this with a school's audience. Chloe always loves to think big. We did not manage to get 130 queer young people signed up for Reader's Passes, but we did go halfway to that in the sense that we brought 70 of them in for an Oscar Wilde study day. And this one just took off like wildfire straight away. English teachers were 100% here for this because it was curriculum connected to the A-level course. The exam boards promoted it for us, making a video that started with not a handbag, but a study day. And we were turning people away. We will run these again. Unfortunately, not every time with Merlin Holland because he lives in France, but he is the most wonderful, wonderful person I think any of us have ever met. We all absolutely wanted to adopt him immediately. But again, it was just a really interesting and very different approach to our previous work, which would be more consultative, and where we wanted teachers to tell us more and give us the lead. Actually, this time, we had gone out with a very defined proposition, and that had resonated for this particular audience. The young people that came to this were A-level students studying either Importance of Being Earnest or Dorian Gray. So our connection with the LGBTQ+ community maybe was less direct than the previous work. So one of our reflections is there is space for both around this, and this is also a way to build allyship. I think that's, yeah.
I just wanted to, before we wrap up, reflect on some of the unintended outcomes that have come out of this work. It's been about 2 years, and in that time, we are part of a much bigger team. We have colleagues who work on family programs and community and outreach and youth programs, all really amazing people who are very committed to trying to make the work as inclusive as possible. And so some of this work fed into other things. You can see a TikTok that was created by our youth program with inspiration from some of the oral histories that came up in our research from someone who worked at Gaze the Word and was there when it was raided. After the Oscar Wilde Day, some of our colleagues in the digital team re-uploaded some articles, but with new digitized resources. Sarah Waters is there because some of her oral histories are now featured in one of our Research Matters workshops. And the Kate Moss book is there for a slightly roundabout reason, but last year we had an exhibition about medieval women that featured an object on loan from the London Archives that was about Ellen Reichner, who was a medieval trans sex worker. Kate Moss came to do some creative writing workshop. She's one of our trustees. Yep. So she did a creative writing workshop with some people during that time, and one of our colleagues pointed out the Eleanor Reichner thing. Lots of the kids wrote about it, and Kate Moss was inspired to include Eleanor Reichner in her book. To sum up, though, here are some of our reflections and what comes next.
Just to reiterate, it's not a linear process, and we absolutely are still finding our way with it and reflecting as we go, in contact with our audience all of the time. And we know that we won't always get it right, and we've had to make our peace with the idea that if we strive for perfection, that we won't get started. So as long as we're being reflective, we feel like that's okay.
We also want to point out that through this work, I think we can continue to be positive and hopeful. We did a lot of doom and gloom with the context, but I think what we found is there are lots of teachers out there who are still really willing and eager to engage with this and to bring students to things and to be spoken to. And there are students out there who really, really need it. It is a bit of an unsettling landscape, but they do want to engage. We also have come to the conclusion that we need to make sure this representation is embedded throughout our program. I think we still have a ways to go before we're sure that this is embedded in a way that can't be uprooted as things are changing in the world, but there is sort of, I think, maybe an urgency to make sure it's embedded in the core program alongside doing lovely targeted programming during special event months. There are still thousands of stories in the collection that I'm sure we will uncover, and I'm really excited to bring them to our audience in the future. So, thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that incredible work, and I wrote down lots of questions and ideas. So you've really got my brain going about how, especially curators like me, can support that kind of work. Thank you so much. And so our final final session of the panel, I'd like to welcome Tash Walker and Sue Shave from Aunt Nell, Sue Shave Consulting for Stories and Strategies, Amplifying LGBTQ+ Voices Around the UK. Thank you very much.
The clicker. Thank you. Yes, okay. Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Tash. My pronouns are they, she.
Hi, I'm Sue, and my pronouns are she, her.
Helpful to get the slide. There we go. Also, I just want to say those presentations were amazing. I know you're there, and I can't see the Railway Museum, but I'm sure. Oh, there you're there. Hey. Wow. And I mean, you made me think about the train that was late this morning and what a train would look like if it ran on queer time. And was I in the third carriage? Yes, I think I was. And it was great to hear from the British Library, you know, being a child of Section 28, thinking about the repercussions of that, thinking about what's happening today is so important, and the work that you're doing is it will save lives, there's no doubt around it. And I think to set it up before we talk about what we've done, I really believe that like collectivity and community is the antidote to social and cultural fascism. So the work that is happening that we've heard today is so, so important. Anyway, we're here to talk about stories and strategies, amplifying LGBTQ+ voices around the UK. Slightly different because Sue and I are not part of Queer Britain, who we worked with on this project. I'm part of Aunt Nell, I'm one half of it. Adam Smith is the other half, who's not here today. And we are a production company that works with archives, with histories and stories and institutions like Queer Britain. And Sue Do you want to introduce the work that you do?
Yeah, I'm a queer heritage consultant, so I'll say more about that at the end.
So we worked with Queer Britain to produce this project. So it's a slightly different angle. But Queer Britain, it's in King's Cross in London, but it's called Queer Britain. Well, problem, because you're in London, in King's Cross. So we went to Queer Britain and said, how are you going to represent the UK? And that represent all of the wonderful queer voices that are all across the UK, not just, sorry, I'm doing that thing, I walk around loads, not just in London, right? How can you really capture this? So we worked with them to apply for some funding from Mindsets and Missions, which is what we got. And the idea around it was how to amplify LGBTQ plus voices around the UK. And we did this by doing two things as part of the project. We made a podcast and we also created a toolkit. In order to do this, what we did was travel around the UK to eight different places. So that was Scotland, Northern Ireland, East Anglia, the North East, the North West, Wales, the South West, and Northern Ireland. And partnered with different community groups in each of those places, and also an institution, so a GLAM, which an acronym I didn't know, I'm sure you're all familiar with, until I started working on this. I was like, this is the campus thing I've ever heard. Galleries, libraries, archives, and museums. So we partnered with one of them and also a community group in each of those places and went out to those places. We didn't ask people to come to us in London. We went out to those places, ensuring that we were working with the community that was in those areas and inviting people to come into one of those GLAMs to hold space for a workshop. And Sue's going to go into a bit more detail about those workshops in a second.
Tash, we actually have St Faggins here, who were one of our hosts.
Oh, great. Oh, yeah, hey. Amazing. And it was really, really great, but we're also conscious that so many people who are LGBTQ+, do not feel welcome within those GLAM spaces. So by working with the community group, we wanted to ensure that we were conscious of that. We wanted to speak to them to how it felt to be in that space. And also, Adam and I hosted the workshops, and we are not part of the GLAM or the institution and our LGBTQ+ ourselves. So it was a sort of a space to hold how they felt, and also for the GLAMs to hear how the participants felt being there and the barriers they felt to accessing those places, which Sue is going to talk about a bit later on. But the outcome of these workshops was an amazing experience traveling around the UK. We went to so many different places, including the place that I grew up in, the Southwest, which I sort of ran from as soon as I could at 18. And we were also secretly kind of looking for stories. So we were there asking people about how they felt being in a gallery, library, archive, or museum. What were their barriers to accessing these? Did they feel like their stories were included in it? We were looking at how you redefine history. History has got kings and queens, and lots of those kings are queens, but where are the stories of the everyday people? You know, it is about people chaining themselves to railings, but actually, I want to know the story of the lesbian who ran a newsagent's down the road, got up at 5 a.m. and then went to bed. I want to hear her story alongside all of the others. So thinking about how we can change those narratives. But we were also listening to those stories, meeting people, and we ended up finding so many people who were wonderful. And then Adam and I went back to those places and recorded their stories and knitted this all together to make this podcast on the left-hand side called The Quilt, which was effectively an exhibition by Queer Britain that is open 24/7. There's no barrier to entry. Every episode was transcribed. You can access it any time of day, anywhere you like. And so this is kind of the way that we were thinking about it when it came to Queer Britain and it being a physical place in London, which of course so many museums are, at how you can really, truly get those stories out across the UK. And then the second part of it was the toolkit here on the right-hand side, which was written by Sue and Sian, who was another person on the project. To look at what were the findings that we had across these different workshops. And I'll pass to Sue to talk about that in a second. But before we do that, I just want to show you some of the pictures of the wonderful people that we met on our UK road trip. This is the trans quilt in Norwich, which was actually the inspiration behind the name of the podcast, and of course nods to the AIDS quilt within the 80s. But we've got all of these different people, and there are some pictures of the workshops there, but it was really great to be able to go out to those different areas. We've heard from the other presentations about the feedback people got. One of the resounding things was that we went there, that we didn't ask people to come to London or to come into the space, that we went out there and collected their stories in their own words. How can you tell these stories and these histories unless you are asking those people who are living it exactly? The first presentation today talked about at-risk heritage, memories. If no one's recording this, then what's going to happen to them? And if we don't do it, who will? These are really, really important points. And then lastly, before I pass over to Sue, I just wanted to acknowledge the impact of doing this kind of work. So often, people from within our communities, LGBTQ+ people, are at the forefront of this work, within museums, within archives, as historians. And that's amazing and it's brilliant, but it's difficult and it's complicated. And that can bring up a whole range of emotions in and of itself. As an example, going back to the Southwest where I grew up, I met all of these queer people, found out all of these amazing histories. And I just didn't know any of it when I was growing up there. And that was brilliant to find that out, but I also found it incredibly emotional. So there is an experience within the framework of doing this kind of work that does have its impact on us. And so we need to think about those spaces. How can we make those projects safer? Are there ever really safe spaces? Safer, how can we hold each other? And that extends to the workshops themselves, because we were asking people to come and share their stories with us, but also hearing those stories is likely to evoke lots of other emotions. So every workshop we had a dedicated person, I was one of them, who was there to help people who had feelings that came up, might need to leave, might to process them, to discuss them. So ensuring you have a space for that when you're doing any of this kind of work, where you're going into people's memories, into their own living archives, is really, really, really important. So I'm going to pass to you now for some of the outcomes from the workshops.
Great. Okay, so one of the key research questions for the project was about wanting to know what the community themselves felt, the LGBTQ people thought the barriers were to heritage engagement. We also wanted them to redefine what inclusivity in heritage engagement actually looked like, rather than us doing that. We did that in two ways. I mean, you've heard Tash talk about the workshops that we did. We gave space for two things in the workshops. So first of all, we, in each of the 8 workshops, which remember are all around the UK, including the home nations, we actually gave them some time to give us, in a safe space, to give some honest feedback about why it was that they weren't going to museums or heritage organisations. And you can see, some of the comments there on the left. And we collated that. And then the second thing we did was we put together a fairly substantial survey as a queer collective. And then we gave time within the workshop itself to ask people to actually fill that out. And we gave them time. So it wasn't an afterthought. So thanks, goodbye. Oh, by the way, will you fill this in? We actually wanted people to have time to think these things through for us. We also gave them a small payment to do so. And all of those, and a bit of support if they needed it, all of those things meant that we got about 80, almost 100% back, not quite, but we got about 80 surveys back. And this is the summary of what they said. You've got a quote on the bottom there. And I'm just going to go through, not necessarily in order, but some, just pull out one or two of the things that people said there. Just picking up on the isolation and loneliness, we went to, Beamish was one of them, we went to various rural communities, including ones in Cornwall, and we also went to cities. And people, particularly rural people, were saying, look, I already feel isolated because, I'm not the same as the people around me, and I don't know anybody who looks like me or thinks like me or is like me, and I'm miles away. So if there's something on in London, I've got to go to London to see it. So location is a problem, and that compounds the isolation. Then you've got cost on top of that. Quite a lot of people felt they were in a lower socioeconomic group, and therefore paying for the transport, however you were going to get to wherever it was you were going to go, and then paying possibly to go in was an issue. Then if you manage to get that far, then you've got real issues of safety and trust. So physical issues were mentioned by a couple of respondents. By far and away, of course, most people said, well, I'm really concerned that there might be some kind of discrimination. That could happen in lots of different ways, couldn't it, during the visit? And, if I'm not discriminated against, am I actually going to get a positive welcome? Or, am I going to see people who are like me? I'm going to see a queer people? Am I going to see content that reflects my life? And if I do go and there is some LGBTQ content, I still have concerns, because has it been curated by people who've got lived experience? Because if it hasn't been, then I might be misquoted and I might be misrepresented. Some of the other things that might come up would be the queer trauma narrative. People obviously understood that, people felt that was really important. Obviously, stories of discrimination and oppression and what people have done about it and stood up for themselves. We were hearing yesterday, weren't we, if you were here yesterday, really important now more than ever to be inspired by those stories. So they weren't saying they weren't important, but they did feel that if that's all you ever talk about and all you ever present to the rest of society, then it's not giving a full picture of queer lives. And one respondent said, well, I cook, I date, I have a faith, I go to work. I want to see myself represented, and also not just in LGBTQ contexts, in the wider interpretations about other stories. I want to be seen in that way. You could be invisible. We heard yesterday, didn't we, from Nell, about bisexual people often not being visible at all. If you're asexual or intersex, or trans people are often missed out. Sometimes lesbians feel that narrative isn't there. So there are also other reasons. Prejudice, of course, kicks in. So, we know that there's racism, we know there's sexism, we know there's transphobia, ableism, and so on, unfortunately, within our own community. And that might mean that if you're a person of colour and who's queer, you won't see yourself, you'll just see a white narrative there. So all of that, was of concern to people. And in the first place, they might actually not know that anything is happening at all, because people are plugged into, I know how to find out about Pride in my local area, but I don't know what's going on in my, local museum or heritage. There's no dialogue. If there's no dialogue there, then they aren't going to know about it and they're not going to come. And then lastly, sort of referring back to some of the things that we were talking about before, people don't see the value in their own stories. Why on earth would anybody want to know what I have to say? So all of these barriers, we've detailed this in the toolkit, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a sec. But basically what we say in the toolkit is acknowledge, own these barriers. They are barriers, they are there. Don't try and solve them on your own. Obviously, you're having that dialogue with your LGBTQ community, even if you yourself self-identify as being from that community too. You still need to know what everybody else in the community that you're working with thinks about it. So it's really important that you acknowledge it, that you work with people to come up with solutions together in order to keep that dialogue open. So Tash talked about redefining heritage, and I think most heritage sector organisations now are past the upper echelons. We'll talk just only about them, and lots of people are doing really good work getting telling the story of ordinary people. That's great, but in the case of our community, it's all up here. It's fragile living memory. And as Tash was saying earlier, if we don't record it, if we don't create oral traditions to carry it on, it is going to disappear because it isn't in mainstream history at all. So answering that question of why on earth should anybody want to know what my personal story is like, and I'm guilty of it too if I'm asked to do it, and I think, well, who would want to know, what about my story? We wanted to get people to think about history in a different way. So we gave them a framework to do it. We asked them to create their own kind of heritage map of their own queer journey. And we said, bring along an object, or draw an object. You don't, if it's a large sofa, you don't have to bring it with you. But in fact, somebody did draw a sofa, and it was the sofa on which they had kissed, their first, they had their first kiss. And so, it's all that sort of exciting stuff that we wanted them to put on their own map. So an object, a place, a special place where your journey, may have continued, a moment that might have changed everything for you, and people. I mean, I talked, didn't I, yesterday? I think beacon was the word I settled on yesterday. But I think, you know, having a beacon in your life, somebody that, and they don't have to be queer, but somebody who supports you, you know, it might be somebody, you know, who you want to be, you know, all of those people, we wanted that on your map. And on the map, we then said, now tell everyone else your story. So they did. And then we made a podcast out of it. And then lots more people listened to that. Tash and I went round the country. Well, it feels like we went round the country, really, talking about this. And, you know, those people are then continuing that conversation. And so, you know, creating that collective shared heritage is what this has all been about.
Queer history is gossip, basically. And I see you. Time. What is queer time? No, I won't go into that. Okay, and to finish up, we're going to play... Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, just quick one, couple of words, really. So we're here to help support you on your journey. Obviously, Tash has done fantastic work on the podcast and all things technical. I'm a queer heritage consultant. I've been working, I think we've got several people in the room that have been working with Queer Heritage South are here, Q Alliance from Milton Keynes are here, and a number of other people I've worked with, including We're Still Here in Blackpool, Margate Pride and so on. So I have a very shiny queer rainbow card, so do come and get one at the end. If it runs out, then just ask Richard Sandell. He's got about 50, because every time I see him, I make him take one. And we should also give a shout out to Queer Britain. As Tash mentioned, we're not actually staff from Queer Britain. I don't think we've got Jennifer here, but Jennifer is the curator at Queer Britain, so I'm sure they'd be delighted to hear from you about 2027 projects and all sorts of other things that are happening. But to finish, we're not going to have the last word. The queer people that we talk to for the podcast are...
Sorry. Everything technical, you set me up, Sue.
I did. I said...
Wait, I'm going to start this again.
Technical one.
Right, there.
And one more time. Look over there. Are we good?
Do you want to just press play?
Yes. It's next again. Just press next.
Oh.
Quilts have this sort of nature of being very soft objects. Quilts are sort of things that, you know, you rest under, you're intimate under, like you can feel a lot of emotion, so maybe like you're sad, like in your bed, things like that. But then also like the structure of a quilt is very sturdy.
If you're a young person, or if you're any person, when there's silence, all you can do is fill in the gap. And that can lead to really dark places.
I remember shortly after I came out, my mother, who is a very wonderful, very accepting woman, she said to me that she just didn't understand what is happening now because there were no gay people back when she was my age. Which again, it inspired me to look backwards and to prove her wrong. I always operate based on spite, I suppose.
This is Sharon and Freedom Zone, and we are waiting outside Standing Young People's Club for the bus to take us to Durham Pride! How's everyone feeling?
Excited. Slay. I'm excited and I'm gay.
So I sometimes imagine myself maybe as a very, very old lady in some care home somewhere, just doing what I'm able to do, you know. Maybe my 5-inch stilettos will be sort of on the shelf just to look at. But
like a trophy?
Like a sort of, yes, not a sort of trophy, but always like a sort of a piece of artwork. You know.
Oh, sexual thoughts, my goodness. They had a parade of muscle men. And I can remember being fixated on the television pictures, attracted to muscular, fit men.
How are you feeling sitting here now looking at all these butterflies?
I feel myself like my soul is flying above this like a butterfly, seeing the world from an eagle's eye.
But then I also feel like I have a lot of repairs that I've sort of had to do, and that's through like, you know, me working on myself, friends, family, like, you know, that kind of thing. And that's sort of similar to a quilt in that way, like having to like repair things and look after them.
Thanks.